A common phenomenon that occurs when people start to inquire or even meditate, or when they undertake sustained meditation, like in a retreat setting, is that they notice there are a lot more thoughts than usual. Now, the first thing to know about this is it's very common that when you sit to meditate, especially if you've never meditated before or you're not familiar with it, is that a lot of thoughts typically come in the beginning. Inquiry is similar. If you haven't done inquiry before and you start to turn your attention to the thought stream itself, you're often surprised by how many thoughts are actually there. So this is totally normal. There's no reason to feel like you've failed, no reason to beat yourself up. Just notice this is how it goes. The second thing I want to point out about this is just a bit of a background. It's not that important. You don't have to memorize this or understand the mechanism. But I like to just say it for completeness. That is that the reason it appears that there are more thoughts isn't really because there are more thoughts. It's because you're becoming aware of thoughts. This may seem counterintuitive, but when there are a lot of ongoing thoughts and we are fully identified with thoughts, it creates an appearance that there aren't a lot of thoughts. We don't realize how much time we spend in the house of mirrors inside of our own mind. We conveniently forget that that thought world is not the actual world. This illusion seems preposterous, really, until you see it clearly. Once you see it clearly, it's quite amazing how much pull it had on you until that pull has been released. So again, when we're identified with thought or mind identified, we're not aware of how many thoughts are actually catching our attention and binding our attention. If you think of consciousness as a sort of standing wave, where the thinker is one side of the standing wave and the thought stream is the other side of the standing wave, you can see how inside consciousness, which in this analogy is fluid in nature, it appears that there's not a lot of movement because the nature of a standing wave makes it appear as if something is unmoving or structured, but it's actually an effect of constant movement with a certain habituated pattern. So this is mind identification. And when we, for whatever reason, sometimes it happens to us, sometimes we purposely choose to do it, we are put in a position to start to de-identify or disidentify from thoughts. We notice how many thoughts are actually there. We notice the volume of water moving through that standing wave at any given moment. That's what we're starting to sense and become aware of when we start to see a lot of thoughts. So that's the background. The next question is, what do you do about it, or what do you do with it? Well, it depends on the situation. It depends on the context. In a sustained meditation context, it's often just a matter of just sitting, just sort of waiting it out, or noticing the movement of thoughts. If you can notice them as more of a unified experience of consciousness, but not thinking about that, the direct experience of it, which isn't always available immediately, but over time it starts to become more apparent. So again, with sustained meditation or retreat situations, often just waiting it out, you'll notice the experience will change. Something else will come. Often an emotion will come, or contraction, or energy movements, kundalini, or some kind of samadhi or peace. But when we're in those environments, we tend to notice that experience can change quite a bit. So sometimes just observing, noticing, and just seeing what happens next is the answer. Now, on occasion, in those settings, someone will find this very distressing, and I'll have a conversation with them that goes something like this. Can you find a belief about the fact that there are a lot of thoughts and what it means to you right now that's in the background? What is your belief about this? What is your concern? And we often get to something like, well, it feels like something's gone wrong, or I'm doing something wrong. Or it'll come to this place where they realize, I just can't pay attention to all those thoughts. They're coming too fast. It's confusing or disorienting. Now, this last conclusion, or this last, I guess, belief that is sometimes not completely obvious until it's pointed out, is an important one to recognize. Because as we're de-identifying or disidentifying from thoughts, I'm learning to say it a different way. Someone corrected me on how to say that. So yeah, as we disidentify from thoughts, we notice that there's an awkwardness about not being bound into thoughts. It's like we don't know what to do with ourselves when we're not constantly thinking, when we're not being told what's important, what to pay attention to, what the story is by thoughts all the time. It can become just kind of dysphoric or strange feeling. So, what I'll point out then is, what if you release the belief that says, I have to pay attention to all these thoughts. I have to know what they mean. I have to know what they say, right? Because we're so used to being fixated on them. Like they're telling us what reality is. And when they come too fast or we're disidentifying, we don't have a chance to do it. We feel like we're missing something, losing something. That's the disorientation. And sometimes it's as simple as pointing out that you don't have to pay attention to the thoughts specifically. Who cares what they say? Let them go. Let them come by. Instead of noticing any one thought or the content of any specific thought, just notice the flow of thought stuff. Notice the stream. An analogy I make in the book is when your mind identified, it's like you're floating down a stream. You're floating at the same speed that the water floating and all the objects in the water or whatever is right around you in your immediate vicinity. So you don't really notice the velocity of the water. But when you step out onto the shore and you watch the water go by, you can see a tremendous amount of water was actually moving down the stream. This is similar to disidentifying from thoughts, especially when you do it abruptly, like through sustained meditation or inquiry. So when you notice that stream, when you notice the stream of thoughts, recognize that, oh, because I'm not identified anymore, I'm not on that stream, I don't really have to pay attention to the story of all these thoughts. I can just notice the flow. Notice the flow of thoughts go by. They can blur together. I don't have to know the content of them. Just feel that consciousness flowing. Just feel it flowing. That's it. It's simple. Just thought. Let them come. Let them come and go. It's okay. So that's an important approach when you start to feel really dysphoric about this or disoriented, frustrated, etc. Now, if you're doing inquiry specifically, I want to offer one other strategy or approach that's actually, I think, pretty important. That is, if you're inquiring into the nature of thought itself, of thought and consciousness, if you're following a pointing like move closer to thought, come in contact with the thought stuff and stop listening to the story of the thoughts, it's a little different. It's not like you're on the sidelines watching a bunch of thoughts go by. You're actually orienting toward thoughts. You're orienting toward one thought. The difference between this and mind identification is key, and that is you're not believing the content of thoughts. You're not in a storyline of one thought flowing into the next, telling you a story. You're noticing, oh, that's a thought, then moving toward whatever it is that that thought seems to be made out of. It's like an investigation internally into the nature of thought stuff, thought material. It's a kind of a misty stuff that a thought is made of, isn't it? If you've never thought about this, check it out. It's pretty interesting. You know, what the room is made out of is colors and shapes and sounds, right? And sensations. You can feel where you touch the floor. That's a pretty obvious place. But where is a thought? You thought about that? Where is it? Can you find it in the same way you can find a sensation? Investigate. Go closer, closer, closer. So with this kind of investigation, we might come into the conclusion, well, there's too many thoughts to do it, or there's so many thoughts. And what I will point out is a very simple thing, and that is the thought. The thought that says there are too many thoughts to do this, practice, right? There are too many thoughts to get close or notice the nature of a thought. That is the thought right there. It's a meta thought. It's a thought about thoughts. It's fine. Just go close to that thought. Repeat it in your mind if you have to. There are too many thoughts right now. What do I do? Can you get closer to that? What's it made out of? Where is it located? Come in contact with it if you can. Move your attention into the thought instead of moving your attention away from it, almost like recoiling from it because it's scary, and then looking for the next thought to tell you the answer. Just notice it. Oh, there's a thought that says there are too many thoughts. That's the thought. Move toward it. What is the thought made of? What is that nebulous substance? Now, again, I don't want you to think about this. I don't want you to come to a conclusion and message me. I want you to just feel into it. Like if you're getting into a pool of water, right? If I say, hey, what does that water feel like? Ask yourself, what does it feel like? How can you get closer to it? I don't want you to come up with a conclusion about what might get you closer to it and tell me about it. I want you to get in the water, yeah? That's what I'm pointing to here is move toward it. Just keep doing it. You don't have to touch in once and come to a conclusion and then become mind identified again. Keep doing it. Keep touching into that thought stuff until you're kind of riding the waves of consciousness. It might be subtle at first. It might be really subtle. You might keep catching yourself with a thought and then notice, oh, that's the thought. Orient toward that. Just keep orienting toward whatever thought wants to arise, even if they just start to barely arise. If they start to barely form and disform, and then the next one barely form and disform, until it's just this coalescing of consciousness into this space that has no name, no forming of thoughts, but it's sort of expansive, sort of intimate. But you don't need to describe it. Just keep merging with it. Keep letting it merge with you. That's how we do it.